The movie begins after 5 years since Dominion, and the world just can't handle these prehistoric beasts anymore. The few dinos left are stuck in steamy jungles near the equator, but 3 of them are hiding a wild secret. Their DNA holds the key to making a miracle drug that could either save or doom humanity. That's where Zora Bennett comes in. She's a pro at undercover ops, leading a team on a mission to snatch that genetic material. But everything goes sideways when they end up stranded on a forbidden island packed with dinosaurs, forgotten ruins, and a secret lab hiding a discovery as savage as it is chilling. So hold on tight, 'cause in Jurassic World Rebirth, the secrets of the past might just eat the future alive. It all kicks off 17 years ago, deep in the thick jungle. A chopper is coming down on St. Island. Inside, there's a bunch of doctors and scientists studying the DNA of all kinds of hybrid species. In one freezing chamber, they're storing the body of what looks like a gigantic dinosaur. Meanwhile, in another room, 2 specialists walk in to run a procedure. But suddenly, there's a major containment failure as they're trying to shut a hatch. A tiny piece of debris gets jammed, stopping the seal from closing. Alarms start blaring, and everyone scrambles to lock things down manually so whatever's trapped in there doesn't bust out. But the doctors who'd gone in to inject some meds don't make it out in time, and tragically, they get killed by the very hybrid dinosaur they'd created. Later on, we see people painting walls covered in dinosaur drawings. Time takes its toll, and those old dinosaur exhibits end up abandoned. In the city, the news reports on an old brachiosaurus that's broken out of its enclosure, causing a massive traffic jam. That big guy also happens to be the last surviving one of its kind anywhere in Europe. That's when we meet Martin Krebs, a rep from Parkergenics Pharmaceutical Engineering, a pharma company working on new meds. He's meeting up with Zora Bennett, who he called in to pitch her a pretty unique mission. Though it's not exactly free of legal risks or ethical headaches, Krebs tells her they're trying to collect samples from the 3 most powerful dinosaurs on Earth to develop a groundbreaking drug that could treat heart disease and save tons of lives. But he warns her these creatures are chilling out on islands near the equator, totally off limits, 'cause every government in the world has banned access to those zones. Still, Krebs admits they're planning to pull off the mission by hiring a civilian. At first, Zora turns him down, but then she pauses, thinking it over, and finally asks how much money we're talking here. Krebs drops the number, $10 million, a cool 7 figures, exactly the kind of cash she needs to lock in a secure future. In the end, Zora agrees. The 2 of them head off to a quieter spot to keep talking. They hit up a museum that's about to close, dedicated to the era when dinosaurs ruled the Earth. There, Krebs introduces Zora to Dr. Henry Loomis, telling him she's the specialist assigned to the mission. Krebs explains they need to capture live dinosaurs for research and to eventually develop heart meds. He says they're after the biggest hearts they can find in these creatures, 'cause the bigger the heart, the longer they live, which is key for the success of their drug. The main targets are 3 species: the Mosasaurus swimming the oceans, the land-dwelling Titanosaur, and the Quetzal catalyst soaring through the skies. Each of these beasts can live over 100 years. Both Krebs and Zora try to convince Dr. Loomis to join the mission in the name of science and the chance to save countless lives. But Henry's hesitant, arguing the whole thing's illegal. Krebs fires back, saying if Henry bails, it'll just prove he's nothing but a zoo junkie. He throws in a dig, reminding him he barely sold 12 tickets in a whole week lately. While back in the dinosaur craze years ago, people were lining up for hours just to get in. Plus, Krebs insists that nowadays hardly anyone cares about those animals anymore. Faced with the pressure and all those arguments, Dr. Henry Loomis finally agrees to join the mission. After that, the story jumps over to Suriname, where we see folks placing bets in this super chill atmosphere. That's where Zora and Krabs meet up with Duncan to find out if he's decided to join the mission since Krabs had already filled him in over the phone. Duncan admits he's been thinking it over, especially because of Zora, but he's got his doubts. He's worried it's way too risky to put his boat on the line, considering he hasn't even finished paying it off yet. Zora, convinced Duncan's the best guy for the job, tells Krebs that she spent a long time working with him to sway. Krebs agrees to double the money they discussed before. In the end, Duncan gives in and says yes. Next, we meet Bobby Atwater, the team's security guy, whose main gig is making sure nobody gets chomped on or straight up eaten by any dinosaurs. Bob's also coming along for the expedition. Their first target for a sample is located near the equator, about 240 kilometers from where they're at right now. As they close in on the spot, Dr. Henry Loomis is busy prepping some special darts fitted with vials to collect DNA samples. But he makes it clear those darts are only going to work if they can get within 10 meters of the dinosaur. Along the way, Duncan goes over to Zora and tells her he's sorry about Booker, the guy who died on a previous mission and was a huge loss for her. A bit later, Duncan opens up about his personal life, saying that with his wife, they only really saw each other when visiting their little kid. So, eventually, they just decided to go their separate ways. Zora, half joking and laughing, tells him they're both pathetic and that despite everything, they got to stay alive if they want to grab the fortune waiting for them. But Duncan says he feels like he needs to pull off something truly big while he still can. The crew keeps moving, heading 75 kilometers further south. Meanwhile, the story cuts to a family sailing on a small yacht out in the middle of the ocean. Reuben, the dad, calls out to his younger daughter Isabella, asking her where her sister Teresa is. Right then, Teresa pops out from inside the boat, and Reuben asks her about her boyfriend, reminding her it's his turn to take the helm. A moment later, Javier, Teresa's boyfriend, shows up looking half asleep, but he refuses to take the wheel, saying he's totally wiped out, and instead suggests they drop anchor. Reuben explains that's not an option because they're floating over water that's 2,000 meters deep and the anchor barely reaches 50. So Reuben decides he'll keep steering the yacht for another hour, hoping Javier will take over after that. Trying to ease the tension, Teresa offers to cover her boyfriend's shift instead. Reuben, clearly frustrated, snaps at her, saying he'd hoped they'd all stay together as a family so he could say a proper goodbye. Teresa, a bit resigned but wanting to calm her dad down, reassures him she's only leaving for New York. Suddenly, a strange noise grabs Reuben's attention. He hands the wheel to his daughter Isabella and goes to check it out. That's when he realizes they're surrounded by massive creatures, dinosaurs. Reuben, in total disbelief, refuses to accept that these beasts could still be alive since they were supposed to be pretty much extinct. Meanwhile, Javier, who'd fallen asleep, is stuck down below deck. Reuben yells at him to call for help on the radio, but Javier is slow to react. Eventually, Reuben manages to get up on deck with his daughters, and not long after, Javier makes it up too. Right as a giant sea creature bursts out of the water, Javier swims like crazy and somehow manages to climb back onto the yacht, coming out of the whole thing unharmed and clutching the radio in his hands. Later on, Zora is standing there staring out at the ocean looking thoughtful, with a hint of sadness in her eyes until the civilian in the group comes over and interrupts her. He asks if she's really a mercenary. Zora nods and says that yeah, her life's dangerous, but way more exciting than his since nobody's ever tried to shoot him. Then she says goodnight and heads off to get some sleep. The next morning, Duncan picks up a radio transmission from the same family we saw earlier, but they are 45 kilometers off course in the opposite direction of where the crew is headed. Bobby suggests maybe the Coast Guard will handle it, especially since they're only 3 minutes away from reaching the spot where the Mosasaurus is supposed to be. But Zora manages to talk them into it, saying it's crucial they go help the family, even if it means detouring from their risky original mission. Meanwhile, the family's exhausted from waiting around. Right then, they spot Zora's boat approaching. They quickly start telling her what the creatures that attacked them looked like. But Krabs cuts them off, insisting they've got to keep moving with the mission. Since the young folks have no clue what mission he's talking about, they try to steer the conversation away. Right at that moment, they realize the Mosasaurus is nearby. It's found them. While they get ready to go after it and stick to the mission, they decide to leave the family waiting, promising them they'll be safe once this is all over. But as the crew heads out to hunt the Mosasaurus, they discover it's insanely fast. Zora has to wait for the creature to come as close as 10 meters before she can take her. Shot. Little by little, they manage to close the distance. Zora takes a shot, but the animal, busy surfacing and diving back under the waves, dodges it. Finally, Zora nails the hit. The tube fills with blood, and they're able to capture it. Everyone congratulates Zora on her killer aim and the doc on designing the weapon. Later, alone inside the boat, the doctor explains to Zora that the drug they're hoping to make from this dinosaur genetic material will only be available to a small group of people, because most folks won't be able to afford something so expensive. He reminds her she should be thinking about the good of everyone. but she cuts him off, telling him to stop talking. Moments later, the same dinosaurs that attacked the family earlier show up. These are predators that have come to hunt the Mosasaurus. At that moment, Bobby charges out, determined to keep firing, but his shots only make him an easy target for the creatures, and they end up killing him. Right after that, the Mosasaurus bursts out of the water again and attacks them too, forcing everyone to steer towards some rocky formations. Meanwhile, Ruben tells Teresa to radio for help and call emergency services. Duncan starts maneuvering the boat toward nearby islands, figuring the Mosasaurus can't swim in shallow waters, but there's a real risk of smashing into the rocks and sinking. So, they all start getting ready to jump. Lair, who'd been taking turns piloting the boat, helps keep the engine running. Meanwhile, Teresa grabs the radio, but Krebs stops her, warning her they can't risk alerting anyone. Desperate, Teresa slips and falls into the water, and her boyfriend Javier dives in right after her to save her. As the boat keeps slamming against the rocks, eventually everyone's forced to jump overboard. Since the area has got shallow waters, they all jump except Duncan, who crashes with the boat. The survivors swim hard until they reach the island. Teresa finds Javier and tells him that the men on the boat tried to kill her. Krebs finally makes it to shore with a lot of effort and tells everyone they need to head deeper into the island because there are amphibious creatures lurking along the coast. Meanwhile, Duncan manages to get himself to safety. Nah, who's also part of the team, is gathering some supplies when she suddenly gets attacked by a dinosaur nobody had noticed was there. At the same time, Ruben, his daughters, and Javier reach a spot with an absolutely stunning view of the island. Greaves goes up to Zora and drops a bombshell. There are mutations out here. The thing that took Nana was one of them. Plus, he admits he'd kept some pretty important info from them. This island is crawling with genetically modified dinosaurs because the regular ones started seeming too boring for the park crowd. There's a lab here that's been creating hybrid species, although some of those creatures turned out too freaky for people to accept. But each mutation is worth $72 million, so they can't just wipe them out. That's when Zora reveals she hired a specialized exfil team with orders to come in if they don't hear from them in 24 hours. According to her plan, they'll fly over the area at sunset on the second day. But they'll only be able to monitor for 2 minutes. Landing would be way too dangerous. Now, the group's facing off against these mutated creatures, and their mission has basically shifted to one thing. Above all, staying alive until the chopper can come rescue them, even though they still need to keep collecting those samples for their original goal. Meanwhile, the family is still trying to figure out a way to escape, find a radio, call for help, and also report Krebs for trying to kill Teresa. At the same time, the remaining team members talk about how the T-Rexes are hanging around the center of the valley, so they've got to move forward super carefully. Later, Zora confronts Krebs about what happened with Teresa and how she fell into the water. But he keeps insisting nothing weird went down and that she just slipped. Zora doesn't buy it and warns him that if she finds out there was anything else going on, she'll personally make sure he pays for it. Then the little girl stumbles across a small dinosaur that turns out to be a mutation, and her sister manages to scare it away. Not long after, Ruben thanks Javier for jumping into the ocean to save Teresa. Meanwhile, Krebs heads over to the lake to fill up his canteen and spots a necklace stuck between the rocks. When Krebs turns around, he comes face to face with the wreckage of a crashed helicopter, the same one we saw at the start of the story. Meanwhile, over with the family, Javier is scouting the area looking for a safe path. He's convinced they've got to follow the underground pipes to reach the island's facilities. While Ruben and his daughters are resting, Ruben apologizes to Javier for calling him lazy and thanks him again for saving his daughter. Javier, though, admits he doesn't even know why Teresa still sticks around with him. Ruben tells him that even when people talk bad about you, you've always got to prove them wrong through your actions, because if you don't, those words might end up becoming true. After that, Javier steps away to go to the bathroom. Meanwhile, the little girl wakes up and realizes the small mutated dinosaur has come back and is now sleeping next to them. As for Javier, while he's off relieving himself, he suddenly notices a dinosaur sneaking up on him. Right then, another dinosaur shows up, but seconds later, an even bigger creature swoops in, grabs both dinosaurs, and flies off with them, leaving Javier absolutely terrified and shaking like never before. The next day arrives, and the team keeps pushing forward. Krebs points out that while plenty of the dinosaurs are herbivores, their predators definitely aren't, which means they're in constant danger. Pretty soon, they start hearing noises coming from all kinds of different species. So they decide to move as quietly as possible. Suddenly, a giant tail swings into view, giving away the presence of the land-based T-Rexes. As the younger crew members run off looking for cover, we see that despite their massive and fearsome look, these creatures actually show some surprisingly gentle gestures. Zora gets a dart ready to draw blood, and the doctor, super excited, goes up and touches the dinosaur's leg, feeling something totally unique and unforgettable. Zora manages to get close enough and fires the dart. They successfully draw a blood sample and realize there's a whole bunch of these dinosaurs living in the area. Meanwhile, the family keeps trekking, still trying to find the facility they've heard so much about. The little girl still hanging out with her tiny mutated dinosaur, who she decides to name Dolores, totally set on taking it home with her. But because they're distracted, they slip and end up tumbling down. Dolores falls too, but gets scared and scurries away, sensing that place might be dangerous. Then, Teresa spots a boat in the distance and decides to go after it since her dad can't walk. Struggling forward, Teresa slowly makes her way toward where the boat is supposed to be. But along the way, she spots signs of a dead dinosaur. As she gets even closer, another dinosaur suddenly appears, but it senses an even bigger predator nearby and quickly backs off. That's when Teresa turns around and discovers a T-Rex sleeping right there. Still determined to reach the boat she sees ahead of her, she keeps moving forward. But once she gets to what she thought was a boat, she realizes in anguish that it's just the bow of a vessel, half buried, incomplete, and abandoned. Panicked, she searches the area more thoroughly and finds an emergency bag. Meanwhile, the little girl goes over to Dolores and sadly tells her she has to leave because this place isn't safe for her. Teresa drags the emergency bag over to the dock, getting it as close to the lake as possible. There, she reads the instructions printed on the bag, which say it has to be inflated on solid ground. From the other side of the lake, Ruben yells at her not to inflate it, but Teresa, dead set on getting off the island, ignores him and activates the mechanism. But the noise of the raft inflating wakes up the massive dinosaur that had been sleeping until that moment. Although the dinosaur doesn't notice Teresa right away, it wanders off to another part of the lake to drink some water. Seeing her chance while the dinosaur is distracted, Teresa hauls the raft over to where her family is waiting. With a heavy heart, the little girl finally says goodbye to the tiny dinosaur Dolores, and everyone scrambles onto the boat. But the strong current in the lake starts pulling them straight toward the area where the T-Rex is hanging out. Panicking, they all start paddling like crazy trying to get away. But the giant dinosaur dives underwater and starts swimming after them. In one swift, violent move, the Rex overtakes them, and with a single shove, flips the raft and sends everyone spilling into the water. The family manages to survive, but once the T-Rex realizes they're still alive, it keeps chasing them and almost chomps down on Ruben. Gasping for breath and barely able to speak, Ruben shouts for everyone to hide among some rocks so the Rex can't get to them. But then he's struck with horror when he realizes his youngest daughter is missing. Screaming her name in a panic, he searches frantically for her. That's when Isabella calls out and Ruben spots her, feeling a wave of relief. She'd been hiding under the overturned boat the whole time because she didn't know how to swim. But all the noise and screaming catches the T-Rex's attention, and it spots the little girl lunging at her and lifting the raft into the air between its massive teeth. Ruben, convinced the creature has swallowed his daughter, is left completely shattered. But moments later, Isabella pops up swimming toward them. When they finally manage to regroup, the T-Rex tries to go after them again, but the rocks block its path. Furious, the dinosaur hurls the raft at them with all its strength before stomping off, roaring in pure frustration. Meanwhile, the team has made it to the highest rocks on the island where the Quetzalcoatlus nest is located. They know it's way safer to collect samples from the eggs than to risk trying to capture a full-grown adult. Since those carnivores could tear them apart in no time, climbs down first with Zora and Henry close behind. They reach an entrance that looks like an ancient temple, and that's where they finally find the precious eggs. Henry starts taking samples from the eggs, and in the middle of it tells Zora again that they should hand the evidence straight over to the authorities instead of giving it to Krebs. That way, everyone could benefit from the scientific breakthrough and countless lives could be saved. But Zora is not into that idea because in that scenario, she wouldn't see a dime. Cleric is busy collecting samples when he suddenly gets spotted by a dinosaur returning to its nest. Sensing the intrusion, the creature lunges straight at them. Cleric's teammates rush in to help him, but the dinosaur keeps chasing him down relentlessly. Thanks to the chaos caused by the attack, the group manages to snag the sample they need. But during the struggle to pull the Claire free, the sample slips from their hands and Henry loses his balance and tumbles over the edge. Zora grabs hold of him just in time, but in the middle of the chaos, the dinosaur ends up devouring the cleric right in front of everyone's horrified eyes. Eventually, they manage to retrieve the sample, and even though Henry falls from a serious height, he's lucky enough to land in water, which saves his life. Zora scrambles down quickly to help him, and soon the rest of the team gathers around, relieved to see that both of them are okay. So, they manage to keep the sample safe and count the mission as complete. Well, almost since now they just have to figure out how to get home. Meanwhile, the family is cruising calmly in the raft, taking in the scenery as they approach the old lab facilities. Duncan, watching from afar, spots that the helipad is located right in the middle of a huge dam, but he can't see the family anywhere. But Zora notices fresh footprints on the ground and starts shouting out loud, convinced the kids must be nearby. Finally, they manage to reunite with the family, but Teresa is furious at Krebs. Amid all the tension, Krebs pulls a gun on the group, demanding everyone stay put and wait for the helicopter to arrive. Right then, the little girl hears strange noises and tells everyone to be quiet. The sounds turn out to be coming from a generator hooked up to a timer. Seconds later, it kicks on, flooding the place with lights and blasting a melody. Suddenly, a mutated dinosaur bursts into the area, forcing everyone to run for their lives, scattering into different parts of the complex to hide. Some manage to lock themselves inside a supermarket, while the mutant dinosaur keeps chasing after them non-stop. Meanwhile, the doctor and Duncan take cover in another section right inside the lab where this whole story began. Zora and Krebs, on the other hand, get trapped under a car and start shooting at the mutant dinosaur, trying to keep it back. At that moment, Dolores, the tiny mutated dinosaur, shows up and manages to find the group. As the little girl offers her some food, it's revealed that another mutant dinosaur is lurking close by. This new creature lunges after the little girl, but she manages to hide inside a fridge. Strangely enough, the dinosaur catches sight of itself in a nearby mirror and, disgusted by its own reflection, decides to leave. Meanwhile, the others come up with a plan and start moving through the pipes. On their end, Duncan and Henry discover there are tunnels running underneath the island that connect straight out to the ocean. From there, they can spot the helicopter approaching, along with various species still frozen inside cryogenic chambers. Duncan decides to go back and find the kids, while he sends Henry off toward the chopper. Meanwhile, Krebs, carrying the samples, realizes he's got the keys to a vehicle and decides to make a run for it, leaving Zora behind. But Zora's not giving up that easy and takes off after him. Soon, she sees a dinosaur spotting the kids inside the pipes and climbing down to go after them. But she jumps in too to help. Meanwhile, the helicopter pilots, not seeing any clear signals, start preparing to leave. But Henry fires off a flare just in time, catching the crew's attention. The helicopter swings back around to pick them up right as a gigantic mutant dinosaur appears, and with brutal force tears the aircraft to pieces. Henry, horrified, takes off, running as fast as he can to warn Duncan about what just happened. Eventually, everyone manages to regroup. Everyone except Krebs. Henry breaks the news, devastated that the helicopter's been destroyed, and their only shot now is to go through a tunnel that leads out to the ocean, where there's a boat waiting. Meanwhile, Krebs keeps barreling forward in a vehicle, plowing through any mutant dinosaurs that get in his way as he races toward the dock, hoping to escape. Back with the kids, they come face to face with the dinosaur that's busted into the pipes, but they manage to take it down. They know perfectly well that if Krebs gets to the boat before they do, he'll take off and leave them stranded on the island. They push on and finally reach the exit, only to run into a control panel blocking their path. Since the little girl's the only one small enough to squeeze through the narrow space, she volunteers to crawl in and open the door from the other side. But right in that area is the giant mutant dinosaur, the same one that devoured the helicopter earlier. Bravely, the little girl manages to unlock the door and lets the others through. At that exact moment, the massive mutant dinosaur gets distracted by Krebs, who charges in driving a vehicle, cutting the creature off. The creature smashes the car with brutal force, but somehow Krebs manages to climb out unharmed. However, in a cruel twist of fate, the giant mutant dinosaur grabs him and swallows him whole. Without wasting a second, Zora grabs the samples that fell from Krebs's hands. Determined to get out, the group rushes toward the boat, but the little girl freezes in terror when she sees the colossal dinosaur looming so close, ready to snatch her up. Duncan, determined to protect her, lights a flare to distract the monster and lure it away from the girl. With heroic resolve, Duncan sacrifices himself, diving into the ocean with the flare, drawing the giant mutant dinosaur after him. Zora, emotionally wrecked, watches helplessly as it all unfolds, but finally manages to get the boat ready and ushers everyone on board. Still, she hesitates to leave without Duncan, wanting to wait for him. But the others convince her they have to go right now. From the boat, they watch in deep sorrow as Duncan seems to surrender to the relentless creature. A short time later, the group is chased by the beast, but luckily the boat's faster, and they manage to leave the giant mutation behind. Minutes later, just when they think it's all over, they spot a flare shining on the horizon. And to everyone's shock and relief, it turns out to be Duncan. He's alive. They quickly pull him onto the boat and keep heading out toward freedom. And they discover that Dolores, the tiny mutant dinosaur, somehow managed to tag along with them on the escape too. Having saved the samples, Henry and Zora talk about what they should do with them. The doctor tells Zora it's up to her now to decide the fate of this discovery. After thinking it over, Zora says that right now she'd rather see the samples used for the good of the world, and that in the end, money isn't the most important thing to her anymore. Meanwhile, they watch in awe as a group of dolphins leaps and glides through the water around them, sharing smiles and hopeful glances. And that's where this story comes to an end.